Hi everyone, I'm Matt and welcome back to Toylytics, where we take a look at the analytical side of toy collecting. Now that we're in the third quarter of 2024, it's time to do a secondary market update for the Figura Obscura line of figures as of the end of quarter two. So let's take a look and see which figures have been released as of this point. Here we go. We've only had one release overall in 2024, but it was two figures, if you recall, the Anubis and the Bastet figure, and that goes with all the other figures that have been released, starting when Figura Obscura began back in 2021. So we're going to look at all of these figures and their secondary market prices and sales over specifically the second quarter of 2024. We will be splitting up the Anubis and Bastet, looking at individual sales because some sellers are selling those by themselves, but we'll also look at the set of them as well as the all-in for the figures plus the pins and the mug. Okay, so let's take a look at the data itself. Here we go. Here are all of the Figura Obscura releases that we've had, and notice I have all in here in parentheses. I also have RE for retail exclusives, so that would be the green Father Christmas and the spectral green Headless Horseman and the red Krampus and so forth. The other ones that were released or that were available for sale, I should say, in the latest retail exclusive wave haven't yet been available, so those will be coming in the future, but obviously not looking at them in this video. So looking at it overall, you can see that we have some pretty good sales here. I think some Figura Obscuras in the past are still retaining popularity, especially the Headless Horseman, the original one, selling 29 units in this quarter, up from 19 in quarter one. Father Christmas, not selling as many, although selling pretty much just as many as in quarter one, but not as many as it did in 2023. Ghost of Jacob Marley, again, maintaining relative popularity there too, as well as the Monkey King, down a little bit, so the lowest quarter yet for the Monkey King, but still the most popular Figura Obscura figure by far since at least July 1st of 2023. So let's look at the sales of these figures over the course of each month. And you can see that nothing has even come close to as many as the Monkey King sold in July 2023. That was 36 units. The closest was the Monkey King again in January 2024 of 27. You can see quarter two, not a whole lot here. The most were Anubis and Bastet. Makes sense, right? The newest figures selling the most, but even still not even close in popularity to the Monkey King. Anubis was 16, Bastet was 14. I guess if you add those two together, that would be 30 units total, but again, that was two figures instead of one in this case. So a lot of times these Figura Obscuras kind of settle in the 5 to 10 units per month range, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less, but still a good amount of popularity for each of them, even several years in some cases after being released. So looking at this is just the quarter two average prices. I want to look at the most recent prices because what happened back in 2023 isn't necessarily as relevant today for what these figures are generally selling for. So looking at the gray bars, those are the averages. The orange circles are the maximums, and the blue circles are the minimums. Okay. So Anubis selling much higher than Bastet as far as average is concerned, right? So 111 average here versus 86 for Bastet. The set together selling for 179, which is a little bit less than both averages added together, although you can see one of them sold as high as 238. The all-in, not a whole lot of sales here, right? But on average selling for 220. Then we had Father Christmas, the regular red one still selling about 75, the green one selling for 55 on average, which is lower than the retail price. The retail price, I believe, on every Figura Obscura from the retailers would be $70, and from the Horseman they're generally $60, unless it's the 2-pack of Headless Horseman or something like that. Goes to Jacob Marley. He's selling on average for $86, so still higher than his new retail price for the retail exclusive, but also higher than the original price, of course. All in, kind of funny. It sold even less than the average. Kind of funny that the all in sold for 81.70, which is a pretty good price, right? Because the all in is, I believe, something close to like $95 or something like that if you buy it in from the Horseman. So that's a pretty good price for the all in. But that's what happens when you have just one sale, right? So as you can see, there's only one dot here. The min, the max, and the average are all the same because there was just one sale. The original Headless Horseman and the retail exclusive Headless Horseman are basically at parity here. They're basically the same averages, a little bit higher maximum and a little bit lower minimum for, so a little higher spread for the original version versus the Spectral Green version, but on average they're basically the same at this point. Not the same situation for Krampus though. The original Black Krampus selling much higher, $96. The retail exclusive red one selling for about $62.60 in that case. Mask of the Red Death, $79, so still holding its value there. And Monkey King selling on average for about $84 there. Okay, and notice some of these from the previous sheet aren't even there because there were no sales in the fourth quarter or the second quarter of 2024, especially for the all-ins of some of these. All right, now let's take a look at the individual sales and start to look at trends over time. So we'll start at the top here with Anubis. So you can see here we just have the release here in May of 2024. So Anubis and Bastet are only going to have sales in May and June. We didn't even know these existed before May. So on average, when they sold, when they were first released in May, you can see that they were selling for 110 and up, even as high as about 160, but generally between 110 and 140. Now, though, they've started to level off a little bit, right? So the highest values here are about 125, and the lower values, some more recent sales coming in under $100. So generally about 90 to about 110 or 120 would be about the range I would look for now. So if you see an Anubis for somewhere around $90, $95, that's probably a pretty good price in today's market. Okay, let's look at let's go a little out of order here. Let's go to the individual Bastet figure. Much different in general. A few higher sales, but mostly everything is $100 and below. So definitely a little bit less popular, at least as far as what people are willing to pay for them. And you can see that a lot of these Bastet figures have been selling for about $75. Okay, so should be able to get a new Bastet for somewhere around $75 as a pretty good price. All right, let's look at the set. And the set together, as you can see, over 200 when they were first released, but now pretty much settled into that 160 to 190 range. So if you look at them individually, though, yeah, I guess that's about right, because I said 75 to for Bastet and about 90 to 95 for Anubis. Together, that'd be about 170. So yeah, that's about the same. So if you see a set, if you want them both, you see a set for around 150 to 160. 165. That's probably a pretty good price. Somebody got a really good deal here on a joint set here for 108.40 very recently, June 29th. That's a really good price. But other than that, hasn't been too easy to get them for less than 150. Okay, I'm not going to bother with the all-in because there was just one. Doesn't really matter. Or I'm sorry, there were a few. I'm sorry, there were three here, but it's kind of hard to see. This is pink, right? So there's one 260 for the all-in here. Here was 180, and here's 220s, right? So basically, evenly split: 180, 220, 260, average at 220. So if you see it all-in for under 200, I think that's probably a pretty good price at this point. Might just be better off buying a set and then trying to buy the pins or whatever else you want individually. Okay, Father Christmas, this is the red one. So looking at him, I don't know why he's blue. I guess that's just, coincidence there that he's not red, but regardless. As you can see, holding steady here, but in general, selling for $100 or less. So there were some instances in late 2023, early 2024, where he was selling for around 110 to 120 in a lot of cases, but mostly in quarter two. Generally, we're seeing $100 and less, and I would say on average about $70 to $100 for him. Although, again, more recently, we've seen a few new ones go for right around $50. So that's a really good price for a red Father Christmas. Looking at the green Father Christmas, not as many sales, of course, but we can see here's that $70 benchmark, so to speak. A few sold for higher than that, but basically everything has been about $70 and below, especially in quarter two. You can see that they've been about $55 to $70. So if you see them for under 60, seems like a pretty good price for the green one. Moving on, Ghost of Jacob Marley here. So looking here, we could see again, it's kind of similar to what we saw with Father Christmas, where earlier time he was selling a little bit higher, maybe about 110 to 140, but more recently in quarter two, you can see that there were a few sales that were above 120, but mostly he's been below 120 and often below $100. So a lot of sales here between about $70 and $100. So again, if you could see Jacob Marley for about 80, I would say that'd be a good price. But obviously, if you find them a little below that, that would be even better. This is the all-in. So there's only a few sales here, especially recently. There's only been one, and as I said, that was that 8170. But before that, when he first came out, some all-ins were going for 120 to 150 or 155. So again, all in for Jacob Marley, I would say probably looking, around $100 would probably be a pretty good price considering the figure himself is selling for about 80. Headless Horseman, this is the original one, and you can see here that prices come down significantly with the release of that retailer exclusive. So now in quarter two, we're looking at highest price about 175, but generally about 160 on the high end to just about a little over $100. So most sales I would say between about 120 to 160, although even more recently some people have been trying to sell them for less than that. So if you see them for less than 120, that's generally a pretty good price. Now looking at the spectral one, let's see, probably see a little bit less variability here, and here's his retail price of 140. That was the spectral retailer price, and you can see that in most cases it's selling for less than that. So at the low end, here's a loose one for 95, but the cheapest newer figure in quarter two was 114.50. So 114.50 up to 140. If you see him again for about 120 or below, that's probably pretty good. Krampus, this is the black Krampus, and a little bit different pattern here, right? So back in 2023, he was selling, pretty consistently for less than $100. But now he's still selling for less than $100 in some cases, but a lot of more recent sales have been for $100 to about $130. Right, so it seems like his price is a little bit on the rise. If you want a black Krampus and you see one for around 100, probably a good time to pull the trigger. On the other hand, looking at the retail exclusive, the red Krampus, a little bit different story. His price is pretty stable, although it's kind of coming down. I would say we have a lot of sales here recently from about $45 to $55. But here's that $70 retail price, and a few sold higher than that, but I'd say you can still generally try to get them for $55 to $70 for that red one. Okay, Mask of the Red Death. So here is our figure himself again, kind of holding steady, but a similar story that we've seen with some of these others. The highest prices are coming down, right? So we have 141 in that case, or 118, but most of the figures are 95 and below that have been selling. So I would say that in quarter two, we were seeing somewhere around about 60 to 95. So if you see them for I'd say maybe 70 or less, seems like a pretty good deal for him right now. This is the all-in. Not a lot of recent sales. The most recent one was in February, 135. So not really very easy to determine a price on that because the all-in isn't really selling very often. And then we have the Monkey King. Oops, need to not select one observation. Here we go. Kind of similar, right? So a lot of sales, still a lot of sales, maybe slowing down a little bit, as we said, right? Not as many as we saw before, but still a lot of data points here. But again, the highest prices are not as high as they used to be. So before he was selling consistently for over $100, but now in quarter two, only a few, and this was in April, only a few sales were selling for over $100 at all, and most of them were 95 and below. I would say between about 70 and $95. So if you see a Monkey King, if you're interested in a Monkey King for maybe 80 or below, probably a pretty good deal, and you should hopefully be able to grab one there. So, what we're seeing with a lot of these Figura Obscuras, and I think I'm going to stop there with, the analysis, because there's Monkey King here all in. The last one sold in January, so not a whole lot of sales to talk about any sort of trend. So I think what we're seeing with some of these figures that have been released for a while is that when they're first released, let's go back to the Monkey King to kind of point this out. When they're first released, people kind of miss out on the initial drop. They tend to grab them for a higher price, over $100. But if you wait a number of months afterwards, generally the price starts to come down. Right now, again, that might not happen with future figures. Who knows? But if you're looking at not overpaying, if you don't really need the figure, but more of like a like to have versus a want to have in your collection, it probably makes sense to wait, because it seems like even though these figures are $60 or so when they're released, they balloon up to close to twice that price immediately, but then they go back down and kind of settle in the $85 to $90 range pretty consistently a few months out. So that's kind of what the pattern has been showing here for most of these Figura Obscura releases. Although we'll see if that also occurs in the future. Who knows, right? This is all dependent upon demand as well as supply. We kind of have a sense of demand, but we don't necessarily know what the supply is. So we don't know if the horsemen are changing the numbers that they're making here. So if fewer and fewer are available, for instance, then chances are the price would increase faster, of course. So you never know, but that seems to be what's happening. So I wouldn't necessarily panic if you miss a Figura Obscura drop or you don't have the money at the time. Probably makes sense to wait a little bit. Try not to overpay. As we've seen with all of these other figures, they've been re-released as retail exclusive repaints in different color schemes. That tends to also help to dampen the price of the original figure as we go forward and those figures become closer and closer to release. As we saw with the Headless Horseman, it's now basically the same, although people really like that Spectral Green. I don't know if everybody likes the red Krampus or the green Father Christmas as much as their original, so I think that's why we still see a little bit of a price difference on those compared to the original. Anyway, it's always fun to look at Figura Obscura. It's a unique line. It's brought a lot of people into the Legions community. And obviously that's a good thing to get more people involved and interested in what we like to collect. So with that, I'm going to close out the analysis here. We're going to move on and start doing some Mythic Legions analysis in quarter two. Interested to get in there and start looking at those. So please like, subscribe, etc., as everybody always says. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.